Finally, Vaughn spoke again. Sera conducted genetic experiments deemed dangerous by our medical council. She attempted to cure diseases using forbidden methods. Nyla abandoned her navigation post during military transport operations. She left civilians without proper guidance. Trevor noticed something. When Vaughn described Sera's crime, her jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. When he mentioned Nyla's desertion, the navigator's hands clenched into fists. These were not monsters. These were people who made choices that powerful authorities did not like. I can choose one? Trevor asked slowly. Correct. Choose wisely. Valoran scientists are rare. Thurian navigators are highly valuable. Either would serve you well. Trevor took a deep breath. His father had told him stories when he was young. Stories about Earth's own dark history. About slavery and bondage and people treated as property. About the long, painful journey humanity took to recognize that freedom was not something you earned. It was something you were born with. I'll take both, Trevor said quietly. The chamber fell completely silent. Even the soft humming of the station's life support seemed to fade away. Vaughn's silver skin darkened slightly, a sign of confusion in Corvette physiology. This is not proper option, Vaughn said carefully. Tradition allows one. You choose one. Then I'm breaking tradition, Trevor replied, his voice steady now. I want both. Sera and Nyla. Both of them. This is not done, another tribunal member interjected. Our customs are clear. One debt bound for one service rendered. I just saved 12,000 lives, Trevor said, meeting Vaughn's eyes. If my service has value, then I'm using that value to claim both of these women. If the tribunal says no, then I guess your honor system doesn't value what I did very much. It was a calculated risk. These beings cared deeply about honor and tradition. Trevor was gambling that they cared more about appearing honorable than about following exact customs. Vaughn was silent for a long moment. The other tribunal members whispered among themselves in their native tongue, too fast for the translators to process. Finally Vaughn spoke. This is highly irregular. No precedent exists. Then we're making new precedent, Trevor said. If we grant this request, you forfeit all monetary compensation. No credits. No trade goods. No fuel allowances. Only the two debt-bound. Agreed. Vaughn's skin shifted through several colors. Confusion, consideration, acceptance. Very well. The tribunal acknowledges your unusual request. Both debt-bound are transferred to your service. Their chains are yours to hold until debts are satisfied. Guards moved forward and unlocked the chains from the wall mounts, but left them on Sera and Nyla's wrists. The women were led toward Trevor. Sera looked terrified. Nyla looked suspicious. Their documentation will be provided to your vessel, Vaughn said. Their crimes, their skills, their medical records. Use them wisely, human. The tribunal will remember this strange transaction. Trevor nodded. He gestured for Sera and Nyla to follow him. They did, their chains clinking softly as they walked. Every Corvette in the chamber watched them leave. Some looked disapproving. Others looked curious. As they entered the corridor leading to the docking bay, Trevor noticed that neither woman spoke. They walked several paces behind him, their heads down, their movements careful and measured. They had learned to be small, to be invisible, to survive. Trevor's ship waited ahead. These two strangers would soon learn that humans had very different ideas about chains and freedom and what people owed each other. The airlock sealed behind them with a heavy metallic thud. Trevor's cargo ship was modest in size, designed for a crew of 3 but usually operated by just himself. The interior was clean but worn, showing years of honest use. Crates of medical supplies lined one corridor, secured with magnetic locks. Sera and Nyla stood in the entrance bay, still chained, still silent. They watched Trevor move through his ship with the easy familiarity of someone who knew every corner and control panel. He checked the airlock seals, verified atmospheric pressure, then turned to face them. All right, Trevor said, pulling a small tool from his belt. Let's get those chains off. Sera's eyes went wide. Master, we have not yet reached your home port. The chains must remain until proper transfer ceremonies. I'm not your master, Trevor said, approaching her. And there won't be any transfer ceremonies. Hold still. He pressed the tool against the lock mechanism on Sera's right wrist. There was a soft click and the chain fell away. Sera gasped, staring at her free wrist as if she had never seen it before. Trevor moved to her left wrist, then to the ankle chains. Within 30 seconds, all of Sera's bonds lay in a pile on the deck. Nyla watched with narrowed eyes, her body tense. When Trevor approached her, she did not pull away, but every muscle seemed ready to fight or flee. He removed her chains just as quickly. 4 more pieces of decorative metal clattered to the floor. "There," Trevor said, stepping back. "That's better." Both women stood frozen. Sera rubbed her wrists where the chains had been. Nyla looked down at the pile of metal, then back at Trevor, her golden eyes filled with confusion and suspicion. "We do not understand," Nyla said finally, her voice rough as if she had not spoken much in recent months. "What service do you require before removal of bonds? This is not proper sequence." "I don't require any service," Trevor replied. He walked to a storage locker and tossed the unlocking tool inside. "You're free. Both of you. No conditions, no obligations, no debts." Sera's breathing quickened. "Free? But our crimes. Our debts to society. They do not simply vanish because you wish it." "Your debts were to the Corvette Tribunal," Trevor said. "They transferred those debts to me. And I'm canceling them. Right now. You owe me nothing." Nyla took a step forward, her hands clenched. "This is a trick. Humans are known for deception in trade. What is the real price?" Trevor sighed and leaned against the wall. "Look, I understand this seems strange to you. But where I come from, people aren't property. We had that once a long time ago. It was wrong then and it's wrong now. I'm not going to keep you chained or bound or obligated to me." "Then why did you take us?" Sera asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "If you do not want service, why accept the tribunal's offer?" "Because if I left you there, you would have stayed in chains," Trevor said simply. "At least this way you have a choice." "Choice?" Nyla repeated the word as if tasting something unfamiliar. "Choice to do what? We have no ships. No credits. No legal standing in most systems. Without a bondholder, we are criminals with no protection." Trevor had not considered this angle. He realized that freedom without resources or legal status might be worse than bondage for these women. They had been part of systems that defined them by their obligations and debts. Without those frameworks, they were invisible. "Okay," Trevor said, thinking quickly. "How about this? I need crew. I usually run this ship alone, but it's designed for 3 people. I could use a scientist and a navigator. I'll pay standard crew wages, provide quarters and food, and we split any trade profits 3 ways. You work for me but as employees, not as property. You can leave whenever you want at any port." Sera and Nyla exchanged glances. Some unspoken communication passed between them. "Employees," Sera said slowly. "This means we receive compensation for labor?" "Yes. Credits deposited in accounts under your names. Money you can spend however you want." "And we can refuse tasks?" Nyla asked. "Within reason, yes. I mean, if we're in danger and I need the navigator to actually navigate, that's kind of essential. But I'm not going to order you around like servants. We're a crew. We work together." "This makes no economic sense," Nyla said flatly. "You paid for us with your entire reward from the tribunal. Significant value. Now you offer us wages and freedom? You lose everything in this arrangement." Trevor shrugged. "Maybe by your math. By my math, I'm gaining 2 skilled crew members who might actually want to be here instead of being forced to be here. People work better when they choose to work." Sera sat down slowly on a nearby crate, as if her legs could no longer support her. "In Valoran culture, debt defines identity. I was born into debt. My family owed obligations to our clan. When I committed my crime, I added personal debt to inherited debt. Without debt, I have no place in the social structure. I am nothing." "You're not nothing," Trevor said. "You're a scientist. That research you did, the forbidden stuff? What was it actually about?" Sera hesitated, old fear flickering across her face. Then something changed. She lifted her head slightly. "I was trying to cure Valoran genetic decay syndrome. Our people are dying. The traditional treatments only slow the disease. I theorized that genetic modification could repair the damage. The medical council declared it forbidden because it challenged their authority and their profits from traditional treatments." "So you tried to save lives and they punished you for it," Trevor said. "Yes. That's not a crime. That's courage." Sera's large eyes filled with moisture. She blinked rapidly, looking away. Nyla was pacing now, her movements sharp and controlled. "I was assigned to navigate transport ships during the border conflicts. My captain ordered me to guide civilian vessels through a combat zone as decoys. I knew they would be destroyed. I refused the order and helped the civilians escape to neutral space instead. 300 lives saved. My captain reported me for desertion. I was sentenced to debt bondage." "So you saved people and they punished you for it," Trevor said. "Yes. Also not a crime. Also courage. Nyla stopped pacing and stared at him. You truly believe this? You are not simply saying pleasing words. I believe it, Trevor said. Look, I'm not going to pretend I understand all the cultural stuff you're dealing with, but I know right from wrong. What happened to both of you was wrong. You don't owe society anything for doing the right thing. Sera stood up, wiping her eyes. If we accept your offer of employment, we can leave at any time? Any time. And you will not punish us for leaving? No punishment. You're free people making free choices. Nyla crossed her arms. We will need time to consider this offer. It violates everything we understand about obligation and honor. Take all the time you need, Trevor said. There are 2 empty crew quarters down that corridor. Bathroom is shared. Galley has food synthesizers. Help yourselves to whatever you need. We're not leaving dock for another 6 hours anyway. Gives you time to think. He started to walk toward the bridge, then paused. Oh, and my name's Trevor. Not master, not bondholder. Just Trevor. You can call me that. He left them standing in the corridor, surrounded by fallen chains, trying to comprehend a universe where freedom came without price and dignity was not something you earned. 3 weeks into the journey, Sera still expected punishment that never came. She woke each morning in her small crew quarter, surprised that the door opened from the inside. She ate meals in the galley, waiting for Trevor to claim the best food first. He never did. He usually ate quickly while standing, reading reports on his data pad, treating food as fuel rather than privilege. Nyla adapted faster, but suspicion remained in her golden eyes. She watched Trevor constantly, studying his patterns, searching for the hidden trap. Every culture had hierarchies. Every ship had a captain who demanded obedience. Yet Trevor asked questions instead of giving orders. The ship was currently en route to Mendak Station, a neutral trading hub 6 systems away. Trevor had cargo to deliver and new contracts to negotiate. He sat in the pilot's chair, feet propped up on the console, reviewing docking schedules. Sera worked at the science station, analyzing samples from their last port. Nyla stood at navigation, plotting course corrections around a debris field. Nyla, what's the safest route through that field? Trevor asked, not looking up from his pad. The safest route adds 4 hours to journey time, Nyla replied. The faster route has acceptable risk levels if we maintain current speed and shields. Which one do you recommend? Nyla paused. In her military service, captains told navigators which route to take. They did not ask for recommendations. The faster route is adequate. Risk level is below 12%. But you'd feel better taking the safer route, Trevor said, finally looking at her. How did he know that? Nyla's training said 12% was acceptable. But her instincts said otherwise. The debris field contains unusual metallic signatures. I cannot identify the composition. Unknown variables increase actual risk beyond calculated percentages. Then we take the safe route, Trevor said immediately. 4 hours won't kill us. Unknown dangers might. You trust my judgment over mathematical probability? Nyla asked carefully. You're the navigator. You've got more experience reading space hazards than a computer algorithm. Yeah, I trust your judgment. Something tight in Nyla's chest loosened slightly. She adjusted the course without another word. Sera watched this exchange while pretending to focus on her samples. Every interaction between Trevor and Nyla followed similar patterns. He asked. He listened. He trusted. It was deeply strange. 2 days later, they docked at a small refueling station. Trevor needed to pick up supplies and check for messages. The station was run by a Drachner family, large reptilian beings known for aggressive business practices. The Drachner merchant, Grell, met them at the loading bay. He was 3 meters tall with dark green scales and teeth designed for tearing meat. His voice rumbled like distant thunder. Human Trevor, Grell growled. Your payment for last fuel delivery was insufficient. You owe additional credits. Trevor pulled out his data pad and showed Grell the original contract. Says right here, flat rate for 5,000 liters. That's what I paid. Contract is old. Price is increased. You pay new rate or I confiscate cargo. Sera tensed. This was a classic dominance challenge. In Valoran society, the proper response was either submit to the stronger party or escalate to violence. She expected Trevor to do one or the other. He did neither. Grell, I understand prices go up, Trevor said calmly. But we had an agreement. If you change prices after the fact, nobody will trust trading with you. Is extra profit from one shipment worth losing future business? You threaten me? Grell's scales darkened with anger. No, I'm asking you to think long-term. I come through this station every month. I always pay on time, I never cause trouble, and I tell other traders this is a reliable stop. That reputation has value. Breaking our contract damages that value. Grell stared at Trevor for a long moment. Sera held her breath. Then, surprisingly, the massive Drachner laughed, a sound like rocks grinding together. You argue like a Drachner elder, Grell said. Appealing to clan reputation. Smart. Fine. Original contract stands. But next shipment we negotiate new rates before delivery. Fair enough, Trevor agreed, extending his hand. Grell clasped Trevor's entire hand in two of his clawed fingers, careful not to crush the smaller human's bones. The deal was sealed. Walking back to the ship, Sera could not contain her curiosity. Why did that work? He was larger, stronger in his own territory. You had no leverage. I had leverage, Trevor said. Just not the kind that comes from weapons or threats. Reputation matters to merchants. Trust matters. I reminded him that short-term gain costs long-term relationships. But what if he had refused? What if he had attacked? Then we would have lost credits or cargo and found a different refueling station. Sometimes you lose. But starting with aggression guarantees conflict. Starting with communication at least gives you a chance at peaceful resolution. Nyla spoke up from behind them. In military service we were taught that strength determines outcomes. The strong survive. The weak submit or die. And how did that work out? Trevor asked. Nyla was quiet for a moment. It created endless cycles of violence. Every conflict generated new enemies. Every victory planted seeds of future rebellion. I watched it for years before I finally refused to participate. Exactly, Trevor said. Strength has its place. But empathy and communication solve more problems than violence does. That evening, Sera sat in the small science lab that Trevor had set up for her. It was not much, just a corner of the cargo bay with some basic equipment. But it was hers. She could research whatever she wanted. She pulled up her old files on Valoran genetic decay syndrome, the forbidden research that had destroyed her career. She read through her notes, seeing possibilities she had not been allowed to explore. Trevor entered carrying 2 cups of coffee. He set one beside her workstation without asking if she wanted it. She had learned this was a human gesture of friendship. Your genetic research, Trevor said, sitting on a nearby crate. Could it actually cure the disease? I believe so. The theory is sound. But I would need live trials, proper equipment, approval from medical authorities. What if you didn't need approval? Sera looked up sharply. That would be illegal in Valoran space. We're not in Valoran space. We're in neutral territory. And last I checked, saving lives isn't a crime in most civilized systems. You would allow me to continue this research? Allow? Sera, you're a scientist. You don't need my permission to do science. If you think you can cure a disease, you should try. That's what scientists do. Sera stared at her screen, then at Trevor, then back at her screen. The medical council said I was dangerous. They said I valued progress over safety. They said I had no respect for proper authority. Were they right? I respected the science. I respected the lives being lost. I did not respect their authority to let people die for political reasons. Then they were wrong about you being dangerous. You're not dangerous. You're brave. Sera felt tears forming again. She seemed to cry often now, though she did not understand why. Perhaps it was because someone finally saw her research as courage rather than crime. Nyla joined them later, studying her own past in the ship's database. She pulled up records of the civilian transport incident. 300 people saved because she refused orders. She had carried shame for that action for 2 years. Now, seeing it through Trevor's eyes, she recognized it differently. It was not desertion. It was the first time she had truly been a navigator, guiding people to safety instead of danger. Both women were beginning to understand something fundamental about humans. They valued individual conscience over blind obedience. They believed that doing the right thing mattered more than following orders. And they treated people as people, not as property or resources or obligations. It was a strange way to live. But perhaps Sera thought it was better than the alternative. The warning alarm shattered the peaceful silence of the ship. Trevor bolted upright from his chair on the bridge, his coffee spilling across the console. On the view screen, 3 Corvette enforcement vessels emerged from hyperspace, their sleek black hulls reflecting the distant stars. This is Corvette Enforcement Commander Thex, a voice crackled through the communication system. Human vessel, you are ordered to stop your engines and prepare for boarding. Trevor's hands moved quickly across the controls, bringing the ship to a halt. Running would be pointless. The enforcement vessels were faster and better armed. Sera and Nyla rushed onto the bridge, their faces pale with fear. "They have come for us," Sera whispered. "We knew this would happen eventually." "Nobody's taking you anywhere," Trevor said, opening the communication channel. "This is Captain Trevor Walsh." "What's the problem, Commander?" The view screen flickered to life, showing Commander Thex's silver face. His skin was darker than most Corveth, marked with ceremonial scars that indicated high rank. His eyes were cold and merciless. "You possess tribunal property," Thex said bluntly. "2 debt-bound females transferred to you 4 weeks ago. They must be returned immediately." "They're not property," Trevor replied. "They're free individuals working as my crew." "Incorrect. They are debt-bound under Corveth law. Your unauthorized release of their bonds violates treaty agreements. You will surrender them now or we will take them by force." Nyla stepped forward, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "Commander Thex, the tribunal transferred our debts to Trevor Walsh. He legally owns those debts. He chose to cancel them. This is within his rights." "You speak without permission, debt-bound?" Thex snapped. "Your voice has no legal standing. Be silent." Something shifted in Nyla's expression. For weeks ago, she would have obeyed that command instantly. Years of conditioning would have forced her head down and closed her mouth. But something had changed. She had tasted freedom. She had made choices. She had been treated as a person with value and dignity. "No," Nyla said quietly. "I will not be silent." Thex's skin darkened with anger. "You confirm your criminal nature. This is why you must return to proper supervision." Trevor stood up, positioning himself between the view screen and the 2 women. "Commander, let's talk about what's really happening here. This isn't about 2 individuals. Your tribunal is scared because other debt-bound beings are demanding freedom. My actions exposed a flaw in your system. You exposed nothing. Our system has maintained order for 10,000 years. Your system violates the Interstellar Anti-Slavery Convention of 2247, Trevor said, pulling up documents on his console. Article 3 clearly states that debt bondage constitutes slavery when the bonded individual has no legal recourse, no time limit on service and no ability to negotiate terms. Your debt-bound system meets all 3 criteria. Thex was silent for a moment. The Corveth Tribunal is not signatory to that convention. It does not apply to us. Wrong, Trevor continued, his voice gaining confidence. The Mendax Accords of 2289 extended anti-slavery protections to all species operating in neutral space territories. The Corveth Tribunal signed those accords. I have the documentation right here. You want me to transmit it to the Interstellar Commerce Authority? I'm sure they'd be very interested to know that a major trading hub is violating treaties. The bridge fell silent except for the soft humming of the ship's systems. Sera watched Trevor with wide eyes. He was fighting for them with words and laws, not weapons. He was using the system against itself. Commander Thex's expression remained neutral, but his skin tone shifted slightly, indicating uncertainty. This is legal maneuvering. It changes nothing. The tribunal demands return of its property. Then the tribunal can explain to the Interstellar Commerce Authority why they're enslaving sentient beings in violation of multiple treaties, Trevor said. I'll file formal charges. Every trade route, every diplomatic channel, every news network will know about this. Is that what the tribunal wants? Sera suddenly understood Trevor's strategy. He was not trying to win through force. He was threatening the tribunal's reputation, their trade agreements, their standing in the galactic community. He was using the same approach he had used with Grell the Merchant, but on a much larger scale. You are one human with one small ship, Thex said, but his voice carried less certainty now. The tribunal has resources beyond your comprehension. And I have evidence, Trevor shot back. 6 weeks ago, a Corveth debt-bound individual named Kess died during forced labor in mining colony Theta 7. Medical records show he requested treatment for his injuries 3 times. He was denied because treating him would have interrupted his work schedule. He died 2 days before I saved that colony from reactor meltdown. I have those medical records. I have witness testimony from other debt-bound individuals. I have documentation showing the tribunal profits from debt bondage labor contracts. Thex's skin went completely dark, a sign of extreme distress in Corveth physiology. How did you obtain sealed tribunal records? People talk when you treat them like people instead of property, Trevor said. Turns out, a lot of beings are tired of your system. They're ready to speak out. They're just waiting for someone to protect them when they do. Sera felt something rising in her chest. Hope maybe. Or courage. She stepped forward to stand beside Trevor. I will testify, Sera said, her voice stronger than she expected. I will tell the authorities about the medical council's corruption. About how they suppressed life-saving treatments to maintain their power. About how they used debt bondage to silence researchers who threatened their profits. Nyla moved to Trevor's other side. I will testify about the military's use of debt-bound navigators as expendable assets. About civilian casualties caused by commanders who treat lives as resources to be spent. About the soldiers punished for showing basic decency. Both women stood with Trevor, forming a united front. They were terrified. Their hands shook. Their voices wavered. But they stood their ground. Commander Thex stared at them for a long moment. His fingers moved across controls outside the viewscreen's range. Then he spoke, his voice carefully controlled. This matter requires consultation with the High Tribunal. We are withdrawing temporarily. But this is not finished, Captain Walsh. The tribunal has long memory. So do I, Trevor replied. The enforcement vessels pulled back, their engines glowing as they prepared to jump to hyperspace. Within seconds they vanished, leaving Trevor's ship alone in the darkness between stars. The moment they disappeared, Sera's legs gave out. She sat down hard on the deck, shaking. Nyla leaned against the navigation console, her breathing rapid and shallow. Trevor exhaled slowly, realizing he had been holding his breath. Did we just win? Sera asked weakly. We bought time, Trevor said. They'll be back, but not immediately. They need to figure out how to handle this without making everything public. That gives us opportunity. Opportunity for what? Nyla asked. Trevor smiled, though it did not reach his eyes. To make sure everyone knows what's happening. To contact the Commerce Authority. To find other debt-bound individuals ready to testify. To turn this from one captain protecting 2 crew members into a movement that can't be ignored. Sera looked up at him. You would continue fighting? Even though it puts you in danger? You stood with me when those ships arrived, Trevor said. You could have stayed quiet. You could have gone back to avoid trouble. But you chose to stand and fight. How could I do less? Both women realized something profound in that moment. They had made a choice. Not because someone ordered them. Not because duty demanded it. But because they believed it was right. And that choice had power. 6 months after the confrontation with Commander Thex, Trevor's ship had become something he never expected. It was no longer just a cargo vessel. It had transformed into a symbol, a gathering point, and a refuge. The news had spread exactly as Trevor predicted. The story of one human trader who demanded both debt-bound women and freed them immediately traveled through communication networks across dozens of star systems. At first it was just gossip among merchants and travelers. Then it became something more. Debt-bound individuals across Corveth territory began citing what they called the Walsh precedent. If debts could be transferred, and if the new debt holder could legally cancel those debts, then the entire system had a fundamental weakness. Lawyers in multiple systems began filing legal challenges. The tribunal tried to suppress the movement, but information spread faster than they could contain it. Trevor sat in the captain's chair, reading the latest reports on his data pad. 43 formal legal challenges filed this month alone. 12 debt-bound individuals granted freedom by sympathetic debt holders who understood the moral implications. 3 colonies threatening to stop trading with Corveth stations until the tribunal reformed its practices. Captain, we have incoming transmission, Nyla called from the navigation station. It's from the Viridian Medical Collective. Trevor accepted the transmission. A Viridian doctor appeared on screen, her blue skin marked with the silver symbols of a master physician. Captain Walsh, I am Dr. Venn. I understand you have a genetic researcher named Sera aboard your vessel. We desperately need her expertise. Sera had been working in the science lab. She rushed to the bridge when she heard her name. Dr. Venn? From the Central Medical Institute. Yes. We have reviewed your research on genetic decay syndrome. Your theories are brilliant. We have authorization to offer you full research facilities, funding, and legal protection. Will you help us? Sera looked at Trevor, uncertainty in her eyes. This was everything she had dreamed of before her conviction. Recognition from the medical establishment. Resources to continue her work. A chance to save lives. It's your choice, Trevor said simply. You're free to accept or refuse. The work would require me to relocate to Viridian Prime, Dr. Venn continued. We understand you may have other commitments. Sera thought for a long moment. 6 months ago she would have said yes immediately, desperate for validation from authority figures. But she had changed. She had learned that her worth was not determined by institutional approval. "I will help," Sera said carefully, "but I will not relocate. I will share my research freely with your institute and any other organization working on genetic diseases. I will consult remotely. I will train others in my methods. But my work belongs to everyone who needs it, not to one institution." Dr. Venn looked surprised, then pleased. "That is even better than we hoped. Your generosity will save countless lives. We accept your terms." After the transmission ended, Trevor smiled at Sera. "You just gave away work that could have made you wealthy and famous." "I learned from watching you," Sera replied. "Some things matter more than profit or status. Saving lives matters. Keeping my freedom matters. Helping others gain their freedom matters more than personal advancement." 2 days later they received another transmission. This one was from a refugee convoy, 12 ships carrying families fleeing a conflict zone. The lead ship's navigator had been debt-bound and recently freed, but lacked experience with independent navigation. "We heard about Navigator Nyla," the convoy leader said, a tired-looking Thurian woman. "We heard she guides people to safety instead of danger. We need help reaching neutral space. Can she assist us?" Nyla took the communication without hesitation. "Transmit your current coordinates and destination. I will plot safe routes for all 12 vessels." For the next 6 hours, Nyla worked with the convoy, teaching their navigators how to read stellar currents, how to avoid patrol routes, how to identify safe harbors. She did not just give them directions. She taught them how to navigate independently. When the convoy finally reached neutral territory, the leader sent a final message. "Navigator Nyla, you have saved 340 lives today. How can we repay you?" "Help others when you have the chance," Nyla replied. "That is payment enough." Trevor watched both women working, using their skills to help strangers, and felt something he had not felt in years. Pride maybe. Or hope. These two people who had been treated as criminals and property were now becoming heroes to those who needed help most. That evening the three of them sat in the galley sharing a meal. It had become a ritual, this time together at the end of each day. They talked about their work, their plans, the messages they received from across the galaxy. "I received a message today from a young Valoran student," Sera said, picking at her food. "She said my research inspired her to study genetic medicine despite her family's objections. She called me brave. Me. The convicted criminal." "You are brave," Trevor said. "You were brave when you started that research. You're brave now, sharing it freely." Nyla set down her cup. "I received messages from 3 former military navigators. They all refused orders similar to what I refused. They all faced punishment. They wanted to know if freedom was real or if it was just another kind of prison." "What did you tell them?" Trevor asked. "I told them freedom is terrifying. It means making choices without knowing if they are correct. It means taking responsibility for your own path. But it is real. And it is worth the fear." Sera looked at Trevor across the table. "Why did you really choose both of us that day? You told the tribunal it was about value and service. But that was not the complete truth." Trevor was quiet for a moment, considering his words carefully. "My species has an ugly history. We enslaved each other for thousands of years. We created systems that treated people as property. We justified it with culture and tradition and economic necessity. All the same arguments the Corveth Tribunal uses now." He paused, meeting both their eyes. "We finally learned, after generations of suffering, that freedom is not something you earn or deserve. It is something you are born with. And it does not mean anything if it only applies to some people. Freedom has to be universal or it is just privilege wearing a mask." "That is why you chose both," Nyla said, understanding dawning. "Choosing one would have implied that freedom was a reward, something to be given to the most deserving. Choosing both made it a right." "Exactly. I could not pick between you based on which crime was worse or which skills were more valuable. That would have accepted the premise that some people deserve bondage while others deserve freedom. I rejected the whole system by refusing to choose." Sera smiled, tears forming in her eyes again. She cried less now than she did in those first weeks, but still more than she had in her old life. Trevor said it was healthy, this release of emotion. She was beginning to believe him. "We are receiving another transmission," the ship's computer announced. "Priority signal from the Interstellar Commerce Authority." Trevor accepted it. An official appeared on screen, a human woman with gray hair and sharp eyes. "Captain Walsh, I am Director Chin from the Commerce Authority. We have completed our investigation into the Corveth Tribunal's debt bondage system. Based on evidence you provided, along with testimony from 47 individuals, we are ruling that the system violates multiple interstellar treaties. The tribunal has 30 days to reform its practices or face trade sanctions. Trevor felt Sera and Nyla grip his shoulders from behind. This was it. The moment they had worked toward for 6 months. Furthermore, Director Chin continued, we are establishing new guidelines for debt resolution across all member systems. No sentient being can be held in bondage without legal representation, time limits, and ability to negotiate terms. We are calling these the Walsh Protocols. After the transmission ended, the three of them sat in stunned silence. Then Nyla started laughing. It was the first time Trevor had heard her truly laugh, not just smile politely. Sera joined in and finally Trevor as well. They had not just freed 2 people. They had helped free thousands. And it had started with one simple choice to value both equally. More ships began arriving over the following weeks. Freed debt-bound individuals looking for purpose. Researchers wanting to work with Sera. Navigators seeking training from Nyla. Trevor's small cargo ship became the center of something larger than any of them had imagined. One night, standing on the observation deck watching stars drift past, Sera spoke softly. I thought my life ended when the medical council convicted me. I thought I had lost everything that mattered. But you found something better, Nyla said, joining her at the window. I found choice. I found purpose. I found people who see me as a person, not as property or obligation or resource. Sera turned to look at both of them. I found family. Trevor smiled. That is what happens when you choose to see people as they really are. When you give them freedom to become who they are meant to be. They surprise you. They become heroes. Outside the window, a small vessel approached, transmitting a request for permission to dock. Another freed individual seeking guidance. Another person ready to discover what freedom truly meant. Trevor opened the communication channel. Permission granted. Welcome aboard. The movement was just beginning. And it had started with 2 women in chains and 1 human who believed freedom belonged to everyone.